Friday evening's wake-up call to the crew of Space Shuttle Atlantis kicked off the first full day in space for the 7 crew members, a day dedicated to preparations for docking to the International Space Station. The first order of business for Commander Jim Halsell and pilot Scott Horowitz was a successful jet thruster firing to refine Atlantis' approach for Saturday's scheduled docking. Afterward, flight controllers in Houston received an indication that one of 2 propellant flow valves in the left orbiter maneuvering system engine may not have closed, and spacecraft communicator Chris Hadfield reported the situation to the crew.
Basically, it's one of 2 things. Either the ball valve, that half of it, the ball valve 2 did stay open, or the transformer that picks off the position isn't working properly, and it's showing it fully open when in fact it did close.
But since the backup flow valve in that engine is operating properly, the situation does not affect plans for rendezvous. The engine will not be used again until the deorbit burn. Friday night, all 7 crew members took part in activating the SpaceHab module, which carries more than a ton of supplies destined for ISS. Elsewhere, over the course of the day, Halsell and mission specialist Susan Helms conducted a checkout of the tools to be used during the rendezvous and docking. Horowitz and mission specialist Jeff Williams and Jim Voss prepared the shuttle's airlock and then checked out the spacesuits Williams and Voss will wear on the spacewalk planned for Sunday night. Halsell helped mission specialist Mary Ellen Weber run the shuttle's robotic arm through its paces, and Weber and Williams mounted the centerline camera in the orbiter docking system in preparation for docking, while mission specialist Yuri Usachov staged equipment for use when the crew enters the station Monday. Halsell and Horowitz wrapped up a busy day with another engine firing to hone the orbiter's approach to ISS, and the 7 crew members headed toward an 8-hour sleep period with everything on schedule for their Saturday night appointment with the International Space Station.
Shuttle Atlantis is on its way to link up with the International Space Station on Sunday. The 7 astronauts on board have reported only minor problems since Friday's liftoff. Their mission is to fix the International Space Station and increase its altitude. But this version of the space shuttle is quite different from previous shuttles. CNN's Allard Butel has the details.
And liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis.
This may look like a typical launch, but as the saying goes, don't judge a book by its cover. NASA says Atlantis is now the most updated space shuttle ever. This mission to the International Space Station is the debut of more than 100 shuttle modifications, including a new state-of-the-art cockpit. Patterned after the Boeing 777, NASA spent about $200 million developing the new glass cockpit.
It's called that because it's basically, if you look at the dashboard, it's all glass displays.
NASA replaced the cockpit's outdated mechanical gauges and monochromatic screens with 11 full-color liquid crystal flat panels. The new glass cockpit is lighter and uses less power than its predecessor.
From a pilot's perspective, there's nothing but good about it. We can put any channel of information that we want on any screen. So we can, in essence, design our own cockpit, put the instruments where we want them across the face of the panel. In some ways, we are just catching up with the current technology. Most airliners, certainly most all airliners that are coming off the assembly line now, have glass cockpit technology.
NASA says the new color displays make it much easier for astronauts to see important shuttle functions. For example, cautions and warnings now appear on the screens in vivid red. Before, warnings showed up as bright green on the lighter green screens.
We've actually seen in our training flow that we can take advantage of the fact that we can reconfigure the displays for the tasks that we're doing to optimize which of the crew members gets to see what information. And in fact, we can duplicate information in a way that more people can keep an eye on each other's systems and back each other up.
NASA's other 3 shuttles are scheduled to receive their glass cockpits within 2 years. Allard Butel, CNN.
Staub über dem Vulkan St. Helens im amerikanischen Bundesstaat Washington. So sah der Berg aus, bevor durch den Ausbruch am Sonntag die Kuppe weggesprengt wurde. Die enorme Druckwelle der Explosion hat tausende Hektar Wald zerstört. Zu Tal stürzende Schlamm- und Wassermassen verwandelten die Straßen in Trümmerfelder. Rettungsmannschaften bergen bisher 7 Tote, 29 Menschen werden noch vermisst. Klimaforscher befürchten, dass das Wetter auf der nördlichen Erdhalbkugel mehrere Monate durch den in der Luft schwebenden Aschenschleier beeinflusst werden könnte.
Kolonnen vor einer beinahe aussichtslosen Aufgabe. Den etwa 50.000 Bewohnern der Städte Kelso und Longview droht zusätzliche Gefahr. Ein etwa 70 Meter hoher Damm aus Schlamm und Autowracks, hinter dem sich Wasser zu einem 5 Quadratkilometer großen See staut, steht kurz vor dem Überlaufen. Die wichtigste Schiffsstraße zum Pazifik ist durch Asche und Schlamm so verstopft, dass die Freilegungsarbeiten wahrscheinlich mehr als ein Jahr dauern und über 15 Millionen Dollar kosten werden. Fische können in dem verseuchten Wasser nicht mehr leben. Farmer befürchten, dass der Ascheregen einen Großteil der gerade aufgehenden Weizenfelder schwer geschädigt hat. Auch der Viehbestand ist nach Meinung von Experten schwer gefährdet. Die etwa 2400 Kilometer lange Wolke aus Asche und Ruß bewegt sich mittlerweile von St. Helens weiter ostwärts. Nach Meinung von Klimaforschern kann die Wolke das Wetter auch über dem europäischen Kontinent beeinflussen.
The shuttle docked with the station about 2 hours ago, more than 300 kilometers above the Earth. The 7-man American and Russian crew is in space to make critical repairs to the station, repairs necessary to keep it in proper orbit. The repair mission is scheduled to last about 10 days. Astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Atlantis are preparing for Sunday's spacewalk outside the International Space Station. The shuttle docked with the station early on Sunday, more than 300 kilometers above the Earth. The 7-person American and Russian crew is scheduled to make critical repairs to the station, repairs necessary to keep it in proper orbit. The mission is scheduled to last 10 days.
Die US-Raumfähre Atlantis hat am Morgen an die internationale Raumstation ISS angedockt. Die Crew der Atlantis soll die Energieversorgung der Station verbessern und ihren Kurs korrigieren. Ziel ist, die ISS in einem halben Jahr bezugsfertig zu haben. In einem Jahr sollen die Experimente an Bord beginnen.
NASA's Mission Control called it a beautiful sight. The shuttle Atlantis docked with the International Space Station about 5 hours ago. Commander James Halsell manually guided Atlantis through the delicate maneuver more than 300 kilometers above the Earth. The crew of 6 American astronauts and 1 Russian cosmonaut will spend the next few days making critical repairs to the space station. They plan to return to Earth May 29th.
Rund 330 Kilometer über der Erde hat die US-Raumfähre Atlantis erfolgreich an die internationale Raumstation ISS angedockt. Damit beginnt nun die eigentliche Mission der 7 Astronauten. Sie sollen Wartungsarbeiten durchführen und die ISS in eine stabilere Umlaufbahn bringen.
Erstmals seit einem Jahr besuchen Astronauten damit wieder das künftige multinationale Raumlabor. Die 7 Astronauten sollen auf der Raumstation dringende Reparaturarbeiten durchführen, beispielsweise Batterien für die Stromerzeugung austauschen. Außerdem muss der Kurs der ISS korrigiert werden, da sie infolge verstärkter Sonnenaktivität immer mehr an Höhe verliert.
Atlantis hat erfolgreich an die Raumstation ISS angedockt. Das heikle Manöver wurde von den Kontrollzentren in Houston und Moskau überwacht. Hauptaufgabe der Besatzung ist es, die Station mit Steuerdüsen in eine höhere Umlaufbahn zu bringen. Durch sogenannte Sonnenstürme hatte die ISS pro Woche rund 2,5 Kilometer an Höhe verloren.
With the dawn of Flight Day 3 on board the Space Shuttle Atlantis Saturday afternoon, the 7 space travelers began one of the most critical operations of the mission, the rendezvous with and docking to the International Space Station. Commander Jim Halsell and pilot Scott Horowitz moved through the rendezvous checklist, and Friday evening they executed the terminal initiation burn, a thruster firing that put Atlantis on track to close the final 8 miles to the station during one orbit of the Earth. With the shuttle half a mile from the station, Halsell moved to the aft flight deck and began manually flying his ship's approach. And as he did, he reported the view to flight controllers in Houston.
Houston, sunrise, station in sight, right in the middle of the coast.
Good news.
As Atlantis reached a point 600 feet directly below the station, Halsell began to fly a half circle around ISS. While slowly closing in, he flew the shuttle first in front of the station and then to a point directly above it before inching the orbiter down toward its target. He halted the approach at a range of 170 feet and flight controllers in Houston and Moscow conducted a final poll of their teams. Everyone was ready.
Atlantis, Houston, we show the solar arrays feathered. You are go to initiate the approach on time, and you are go for docking.
Copy. Go for approach. Go for docking.
Halsell resumed the planned approach, holding position 30 feet from the station to ensure that the two docking mechanisms were properly aligned. Then he began closing that final distance at a speed of just 1/10 of a foot per second.
Contact and capture confirmed.
Houston, we have capture.
Roger, congratulations.
Hooks and latches in the two mechanisms were engaged to firmly link the shuttle's orbiter docking system to the station's pressurized mating adapter, and the astronauts completed the docking activities with a series of leak and pressure tests between the two vehicles. As Atlantis and the International Space Station began the first orbit of a planned 5.5 days of joint docked operations, mission specialist Jeff Williams and Jim Voss and their crewmates turned their attention to preparing the spacesuits and the tools they'll use to continue outfitting the station during the 6.5-hour spacewalk slated to begin Sunday night. Flight controllers in Houston didn't have to work too hard to awaken the crew of Space Shuttle Atlantis to begin Flight Day 4 Sunday afternoon. Mission Specialist Jeff Williams said they were already up, eager to begin the planned 6.5-hour spacewalk.
Good morning, Houston. We're up and wide awake and ready to go and looking forward to checking the view from outside of ISS and Shuttle docked together after that wonderful rendezvous yesterday.
Assisted by the spacewalk choreographer, pilot Scott Horowitz, Williams and mission specialist Jim Voss donned special cooling garments before moving into the airlock and climbing into their spacesuits. Horowitz joined mission specialist Mary Ellen Weber, who was on the flight deck at the controls of the shuttle's robotic arm, along with her backup, Commander Jim Halsell. About half an hour ahead of schedule, the spacewalkers opened the airlock hatch and floated into the payload bay. Once out the door to begin his first spacewalk, Williams moved around the payload bay and up the station, preparing the work site and getting used to the environment. Voss, a veteran of one previous spacewalk, went to work on the end of the robot arm, setting up a variety of tools and attaching a foot restraint, and then stepping into that foot restraint and securing his boots in place. The first task, check the American cargo crane, the orbital replacement unit transfer device. Installed on a spacewalk during the last assembly mission almost a year ago, later photo analysis led mission managers to believe the OTD was rotating on its base. After Voss attached a tether to the crane, Williams released it from the pressurized mating adapter and examined it. Finding no damage to the crane or to the socket, they carefully reattached it. With the shuttle out of range of television coverage, they told Horowitz that the OTD was now firmly in place.
It does not rotate. All right, Jeff, good job.
All right, guys. Jeff, look at that. Remember the secondary test how the knob locks down that didn't hit the shoulder?
It did not hit the shoulder.
So it actually locked and installed correctly. That sounds really good. Double check your pull. Twist that, please.
I did, and I had rotated it before to see what it felt like when it was loose, and it is not loose anymore.
Next up, complete the assembly of a Russian cargo crane called Strela. Williams and Voss released the crane's components from the shuttle's integrated cargo carrier and one at a time attached them to the Strela operating post on pressurized mating adapter number 2, where the STS-96 spacewalkers installed it last year. Once completely assembled, they removed the entire structure from PMA-2, and Voss held on as the shuttle's robot arm moved him up the station to pressurized mating adapter number 1, where they put Strela in place for future use in moving cargo around the Russian section of the station. After that, replacement of an antenna for the early communications system in the Unity module. Williams removed the box on the port side of Unity, handed it off to Voss and received a replacement component, then completed the connections of several cables while Voss stowed the old box for return to Earth. With the major tasks finished and running ahead of schedule, Voss moved on to install a series of handrails on Unity, which will aid future spacewalkers. Williams installed a cable for a camera that will assist future shuttle dockings to the station, and he restrained cables which were obstructing a target for the system that creates virtual views of areas of the station that are out of the line of sight for astronauts inside the shuttle. As the spacewalk drew to a close, Williams returned to the OTD for a new task. After Russian mission managers expressed concern that the OTD's orientation might block communication paths from the Zarya control module, Williams was asked to turn the crane slightly to clear that path. Then he joined Voss to pack up their tools and clean up the payload bay. They closed the airlock hatch, concluding a 6-hour and 44-minute-long excursion, and rejoined their crewmates inside Atlantis to get ready for Monday evening's entrance into the International Space Station.
Am frühen Morgen stiegen die beiden aus ihrem Shuttle aus. Sie sollen an der Außenseite der Station einen Mast befestigen, eine Antenne auswechseln und einen neuen Baukran installieren. Die Arbeiten sollen etwa 6 Stunden dauern.
2 Astronauten der US-Raumfähre Atlantis haben mit Reparaturarbeiten an der internationalen Raumstation ISS begonnen. Dort hatte die Atlantis zuvor angedockt. Weil das russische Service- und Wohnmodul erst verspätet eingetroffen ist, beginnen einzelne Teile der Station zu versagen und müssen erneuert werden. In einem etwa 6-stündigen Außenbordeinsatz sollen unter anderem ein neuer Baukran installiert und eine Antenne ausgewechselt werden. In 7 Tagen wird die Atlantis auf der Erde zurückerwartet.
Nationalen Raumstation ISS aufgenommen. Unter anderem soll eine defekte Antenne ausgetauscht und ein russischer Kran befestigt werden. Die Crew der Atlantis muss auch noch mehrere Batterien für die Stromerzeugung ersetzen. Zum Abschluss der Reparaturmission soll die Raumstation ISS auf eine höhere Umlaufbahn gebracht werden.
Welcome back. 2 of the astronauts on board the Space Shuttle Atlantis are making repairs outside the International Space Station. Their 6.5-hour spacewalk began with repairs to communications gear. A new Russian crane has to be built, and they have to fix a United States crane, which was improperly attached last year. Atlantis's own flight wasn't trouble-free either. A shut-off valve on one of its engines is apparently stuck open. Now the
7-stündigen Weltraumspaziergang haben 2 Astronauten der US-Raumfähre Atlantis erste Reparaturen an der internationalen Raumstation ISS abgeschlossen. Unter anderem befestigten sie einen vor Monaten ins Wackeln geratenen Kran. Hauptaufgabe der Besatzung, zu der auch ein Russe gehört, ist es, die Raumstation neu auszurichten und zu stabilisieren. Außerdem soll die ISS in eine höhere Umlaufbahn gebracht werden.
The Flight Day 5 wake-up call to the 7 astronauts and cosmonauts on board Space Shuttle Atlantis marked a new phase of this mission, the maintenance of equipment inside the International Space Station. The crew gathered on the shuttle middeck Monday afternoon to review their plans for the day. Then mission specialists Yuri Usachov and Susan Helms, who along with crewmate Jim Voss will return to the station next year as the second long-duration crew to live there, put their station training to work. They opened the hatch into pressurized mating adapter number 2, and after conducting final checks, they opened the hatch into the node, leading the 3rd group of international space travelers inside the International Space Station's Unity module, and then from PMA-1 into the Zarya control module. The first job was to test the quality of the air inside the station, and to install air ducting to improve the circulation of fresh air from the shuttle through the components of ISS. Poor air circulation is believed to be a cause of the degraded air quality encountered by the previous crew in some parts of the station. So this mission arrived with new environmental procedures to help ensure the safety of the crew members. After the checks on the station's environmental system, Usachov and Helms opened a floor panel in Zarya to begin one of the top priority tasks of this mission to extend the life of the control module, battery replacement. in a repeat of a task Usachov conducted many times during his 2 trips to the Mir space station. He and Helms removed 2 of the Russian-built batteries and their attendant electronics control boxes and installed replacement components. Voss described their work and the hardware.
All right now, you've probably seen it all, but we've changed out the battery, and Susan is replacing the boot. She's put the new one in, and she's putting in the fasteners, and Yuri is now working on removing the old tub. And for those that don't know, a patub is a converter unit for current for the battery.
Flight controllers will monitor the batteries during the nearly day-long charge-up period. There are plans to replace 1 additional set of battery equipment on each of the next 2 days of docked operations, leaving the station with 4 new batteries out of its complement of 6. In the meantime, mission specialist Mary Ellen Weber took up her station in the Space Hab module, preparing the transfer of supplies for ISS. During the docked period of this mission, the crew of Atlantis is to bring more than a ton of material onto the station, including water, exercise and medical equipment, clothes, and other personal supplies for the expedition crews. After a full day's work inside the station, the 7 space travelers reviewed their progress as well as the plans for the coming day. That includes replacing another battery block, transferring more logistics and supplies, and boosting the station's altitude in preparation for July's planned arrival of its next component, the service module Zvezda.
Der US-Raumfähre Atlantis sind in der Nacht in die internationale Raumstation ISS umgestiegen. Die Amerikanerin Susan Helms und der Russe Juri Usachev sind die ersten Besucher der Station seit einem Jahr. Ihre wichtigste Aufgabe ist es, 4 schadhafte Batterien auszuwechseln, um die Stromversorgung wieder voll herzustellen. Nach dem Öffnen der Luke begann die insgesamt 7-köpfige Besatzung auch mit dem Umladen von Ersatzteilen und Versorgungsgütern.
Raumstation ISS einen Besuch abgestattet. Sie sind die ersten dort seit einem Jahr. In der ISS sollen die schadhaften Batterien ausgetauscht werden, um die Stromversorgung wiederherzustellen. Für spätere, längere Einsätze auf der Raumstation wurden auch Versorgungsgüter auf die ISS transportiert.
ISS. 2 Astronauten der Atlantic Crew sind in der Nacht in die internationale Raumstation umgestiegen. Hauptaufgabe ist es, die Stromversorgung wiederherzustellen. Die Besatzung lud etwa 500 Kilo Ersatzteile und Versorgungsgüter in das Rumpfmodul. Noch bis zum 29. Mai wird die Crew an der ISS arbeiten.
Amerikanische Trägerrakete mit russischen Triebwerken ins All gestartet. Die Atlas-Rakete brachte einen europäischen Kommunikationssatelliten in den Weltraum. Das russisch-amerikanische Gemeinschaftsprojekt gelang erst beim 3. Startversuch.
Here we are on the flight deck, where we don't have too much work during the day today. There's Scott keeping track of all of the work that has to be done with our flight plan, making sure that we didn't lose track of where we were. This is Scott's corner. He's got pictures of his family up there with his Georgia Tech banner, where he got his PhD. Most people have a little place like that. We got some of them in the video and some of them we missed because we didn't know where they were hiding their pictures. Now looking around at the back side to the windows, you can see part of the space station, the pressurized mating adapter out the back that connects us up to the station. A little bit of the Earth in the background. And then through the other window, good view of the beautiful blue ocean below us as we fly over it. And out the overhead window, a little bit obscured by a space vision system experiment that Scott was working on, and the Earth behind. Now we're headed down to the middeck where we've had to stow everything while we're transferring things over to the space station. So it's really gotten congested down there, as you'll see. You probably saw the computers up there that Susan has set up and got working for us with our RF LAN. There's the ergometer, which hasn't gotten very much business so far, and we hope to get to use that. And here's Bubba and Junior, our 2 stowaway spacemen that we used yesterday while we were outside. Now we're headed back through my little corner, my Auburn shirt and my family pictures. A little bit longer pause here, of course. After all, I am the producer and director. Now we're going out through a little tunnel extension into the airlock, which connects us up to the space hab in the back and the station, which is actually above us at this time. Now we're passing through the tunnel adapter that connects us up to a long tunnel that goes down to the space hab. Since I was being controlled here by an ace pilot, he couldn't resist doing an aileron roll through the tunnel. This is one of the most fun things we get to do, is flying down this very long tunnel like this. There's Mary Ellen, who is in charge of Space Hab, and she did get out of our way to come through with the camera. She moved another one of the things that she's transferring. And then we pop up to take a look out of one of the viewports on the top of the Space Hab. A great deal of the equipment that we're transferring to the space station is located in the Space Hab, and Mary Ellen is responsible for getting it all in order and then sending it over to the station for us. Scott was doing aerobatics with me right now, and then we're headed back out. But we'll stop off and take a look at one of the secondary experiments. It's called SOAR. It involves global positioning system for the space station. It's the future way that we'll know our attitude on the space station. That was Mary Ellen's little corner with her husband and dog. The rest of the crew is suggesting that they're not sure who's the most important one in her life. Mary Ellen says it's hands down her husband. Now we're headed back to the airlock again, and then we're going to swoop up into the International Space Station, out through the top of the airlock. We have ducts and wires and things going into the station, so we have good airflow as well as electricity and other things. Here, Jeff Williams and Jim Halsell are working in the area between the pressurized mating adapter and the node. They're putting some labels in there. And then on into the node, the first real large space in the space station. It's a connecting point for most of the other modules that will eventually be on the space station. We'll just take a look around. It's really quite large. You can place a person like they did Mary Ellen today out in the middle of it, and they can't get to any of the handrails. They just sort of flop around. And now we head off the other side of the node, heading through another pressurized mating adapter to connect us to the other large piece of the space station, the functional cargo block. The first part of it is a pressurized adapter, and then on into, which we'll take a look around, I guess. First of all, there's a big duct for airflow, one of the fire extinguishers that we changed out today. Here's Scott. He came off the flight deck and is headed back to help out in the FGB. And now into the FGB, where we did a lot of the work today. Susan Helms and Yuri Usachov worked back here all day long. Thanks, Scott. They replaced a couple of battery sets to keep the FGB working. We're just going to run past them here, down to the end of the FGB to show you what the size of it is now with all of our stowage on board. You'll notice how well everything is stowed in the aisles there, velcroed down very securely so it won't move around while we're maneuvering the space station. Now we're going to go back to where Susan, get ready. This is Yuri and Susan. They'd already done their battery work, and now they're getting ready for tomorrow's activities. The Compara system is for commanding on the space station. Yuri's joking around, but all those wires back there have to be reconfigured for them to do this work tomorrow. Now we're just headed back. And that was it, Mario. That's kind of a tour around our space station as we see it today.
And Jim, really appreciate the downlink and the narration. It was outstanding. Gives folks a good idea of what the station looks like and maybe what will be out that last hatch on the FGB in the future.
Thanks, Mario. Talk to you later. We're going to bed now.
Good night. Sleep well.
After the drama of their first day inside the International Space Station, the crew of Space Shuttle Atlantis awoke for Flight Day 6 Tuesday afternoon, eager to get busy with another full-day schedule of supplies transfers and maintenance tasks. For Commander Jim Halsell and pilot Scott Horowitz, the day started on the flight deck, where they fired the shuttle's steering jets 27 times over the course of almost an hour to raise the Atlantis ISS complex's altitude by an average of 10 miles. Similar reboosts are planned on each of the next 2 days, with the goal of leaving the station in the proper orbit for its scheduled rendezvous with the service module, Zvezda, in July. Mission specialist Mary Ellen Weber began her day in the Spacehab module, preparing for the transfer of hundreds of pounds of supplies, from personal items and medical supplies for future long-duration crews to office supplies and exercise equipment, to move it onto the station, where mission specialist Jeff Williams is in charge of seeing that it's stowed in the proper locations in the Zarya control module and the Unity node. Maintenance and replacement of equipment topped the agenda for mission specialists Yuri Usachov and Susan Helms, who replaced a number of fans and smoke detectors in Zarya and completed installation of cabling for the module's Comparis telemetry system, which permits Russian flight controllers to communicate with the module when it is out of range of Russian ground stations. Prior to a series of interviews Tuesday evening, Halsell gathered his crew in the Unity module and sent a message on behalf of them all.
We'd just like to say how much of a privilege it is for us to be up here and to do this. And we represent thousands of people from many, many different countries who are participating in this very, very important and exciting program. And with those thoughts, I'd like to have Jim Voss and Susan and Yuri Usachev head on off to their duties in the FGB.
Asked about the conditions inside the station, Halsell reported that it was very comfortable and clean, and commented on the value of having Usachov, Helms, and mission specialist Jim Voss along on this mission to get an advance look at the place they'll be living for several months next year.
No, we've had no operational impacts at all as a result of poor air quality. The air has been just fine. It is true that when we first moved into the station, the room we're in here was slightly warm, but it cooled down just as soon as we were able to get all the hatches open and all the air ducts in place and the ventilation going. In general, the air quality has been outstanding, and with regard to the noise, I was surprised. I had heard everybody's comments about how to expect loud noises, and it is in fact quieter here than it is on board the shuttle, and the shuttle is quiet enough to meet all the OSHA standards. So we have not experienced any problems with regard to living conditions on board the station. And I know that the people who are here working on the station, the International Space Station crew number 2, it's been a very, very valuable experience for them to come up here to see what it's going to be like. So it's no longer a mystery. They know exactly what they're getting into, and they're enthusiastic about returning as a crew on board the station.
The astronauts also responded to questions that were more philosophical than operational. Williams about what it was like to make a spacewalk, and Horowitz on his feelings as the shuttle approached the station to link up to it.
It was everything I expected and more. It was just absolutely fantastic to go out there and view the station from outside, and to actually look at the rest of the crew inside the window. I actually snuck up on them at one point and surprised them and looked in the window. It was also just a magnificent view to see God's creation going by below us.
Well, sure.
my previous missions have been, shuttle only, worked with the Hubble telescope, but it wasn't another, if you will, vehicle for folks to live in. So here we went from what was the only vehicle that people could ride around the Earth to join up with a permanent outpost in space. And it kind of brought a flashback, if you will, to when I was a kid and saw 2001. And the scenes where you see the shuttle docking with the large station. This one's not nearly that big yet, but it's going to keep getting bigger over the next couple of years, and it's going to be quite a place to come visit.
Wednesday morning, Usachov, Helms, and Voss opened a floor panel in Zarya and replaced a third battery, along with its current converter unit and electronics controller. It will be charged and checked out over an almost 24-hour period. Russian flight controllers report that of the 2 new battery units installed Tuesday morning, the first has charged up as planned and is in excellent shape, and the second is being charged now. Replacement of a 4th of the module's 6th batteries remains scheduled for Flight Day 7, along with other maintenance work and the continuing transfer of supplies to prepare the International Space Station for the scheduled arrival of its first resident crew late this year.
The astronauts on board Atlantis were awakened by mission control to continue work on the International Space Station on their 4th day of docked operations. The crew spent their 3rd day inside the station continuing maintenance work and supply transfer activities that began Monday evening. More than 3,000 pounds of supplies and equipment will be transferred to the station before Atlantis undocks on Friday evening. Mission specialist Jim Voss and pilot Scott Horowitz also installed stowage racks behind the wall panels in the Zarya module, giving more storage room for future crews living on the station. Meanwhile, mission specialist and future station residents Susan Helms, Jim Voss, and Yuri Usachov completed the installation of the 4th and final new battery in the Zarya module. Both of the batteries replaced on Monday night are now fully recharged and working well. The 3rd battery, which was replaced last night, is now undergoing its 20-hour charging process. Because of some minor irregularities controllers have seen during that process, the crew may be asked to double-check connections for the battery's electronics tomorrow. Other work included the replacement of a Zarya radio telemetry memory unit, which had reached the end of its design life. The radio telemetry system collects and stores station data when ground communication is not available. Horowitz and Commander Jim Halsell conducted the 2nd of 3 planned reboost maneuvers to raise the station's altitude. The nearly 1-hour procedure involved 27 pulse firings of Atlantis' maneuvering thrusters. The 3 reboosts will place the station at the optimum altitude for the arrival of the Zvezda service module when it is launched in July. Inside the Unity module, several crew members took time to discuss their work on orbit. Halsell explained the important role of international cooperation in space.
As important as it is for mankind to push out into space, and to do that starting with the International Space Station, it's equally important that we work together, all of the nations of the world, toward this common goal. And as difficult as the space station program has been at times, the opportunity to work together as a team, bringing together all the different nations, makes it all worthwhile. So that is the theme, and that is a lesson to be learned.
Helms addressed the noise level on board the station.
Well, I know that there was a lot of preparatory work done in anticipation of there being a problem. For example, we've improved the circulation back in the FGB, and we've got, of course, acoustic mufflers and the like over a lot of the areas that are more noisy. And I've been back there a lot in the last couple of days, and I honestly have not noticed a problem. Yuri and I have been busy working hard, and we have never stopped and even noticed that our environment was in any way disturbing us.
Nearing completion of all their mission's objectives, Atlantis' astronauts plan to spend one final day aboard the International Space Station before departing the outpost Friday evening to head toward a landing in Florida early on Monday. The 7 astronauts aboard Shuttle Atlantis were awakened by mission control Thursday afternoon to spend their final full day docked to the International Space Station as they prepared for undocking Friday evening. The crew completed its main task of the day, the transfer of goods and supplies to the station. The crew moved more than 3,000 pounds of material onto the station during their stay. Mission specialist Mary Ellen Weber described the items brought on board the station.
Well, we're bringing everything from batteries and fans and fire extinguishers all the way to clothing and personal hygiene equipment. You name it, we got it.
Commander Jim Halsell and pilot Scott Horowitz completed the third and final reboost maneuver. Horowitz explained the process of boosting the station.
Commander Jim Halsell and myself just finished a reboost a little while ago. What we do is we use the shuttle jets to propel the shuttle and the station, since we're hooked together, into a higher orbit. And the way we did that was we used the jets firing out of the back of the space shuttle, and we very gently boosted ourselves and the station to a higher velocity, which pushes us up into a higher orbit.
The astronauts have completed all battery work on the station. The third battery that was replaced completed its charging and testing and was put back online, supporting station operations. The fourth and final battery began its recharge and will be back online before Atlantis undocks Friday afternoon. Later, Halsell and his crew left the station, reversing the steps they took when they entered Monday evening, closing each of the 6 hatches associated with the station components or transfer tunnels. Flight controllers in Russia assisted by equalizing the pressure between Zarya's 2 compartments by remote control. When Atlantis undocks Friday evening, it will leave behind a refurbished orbiting facility, operating at a higher altitude and featuring new electrical and communication components. The station is now ready to receive its next major piece, the Zvezda service module, when it is launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan in July. The 7 astronauts aboard Atlantis were awakened by Mission Control with a song in tribute to cosmonaut crew member Yuri Usachov. Usachov and the rest of the crew then spent the early part of their day preparing for undocking with the International Space Station. Commander Jim Halsell got the call from Mission Control Friday evening to begin separation from the orbiting outpost.
You are go for undocking.
All right, go for undocking.
Mission specialist Mary Ellen Weber and Jeff Williams monitored the connection between Atlantis' orbiter docking system and the station's docking system. With pilot Scott Horowitz at the controls, Atlantis was pushed straight up as springs in the docking mechanism separated Atlantis from the station as the 2 spacecraft crossed over Kazakhstan. After gently backing away some 420 feet, Horowitz flew the shuttle nose forward for half a loop to survey the station, then fired Atlantis' maneuvering jets for a final separation. The crew then powered down some of the equipment used during the undocking and fly-around and performed some routine housekeeping tasks. The astronauts then took time for a meal and enjoyed several hours of off-duty time, a well-deserved break from the ambitious pace of the work they maintained throughout the flight. Toward the end of the crew's day, future station residents Usachov, Susan Helms, and Jim Voss took some time to talk with Russian media gathered at the Russian Mission Control Center just outside Moscow.
You know, the station is in great shape, I think. We were docked with the American segment, with the node. First we entered the node, and it is a little bit larger than our usual Russian modules, a lot of volume. It's time to stretch your legs. Great technology. A lot of equipment in the FGB unit right now, but it was really dry. I'm in the atmosphere. We have reconfigured a little bit the air ducts, and the noise was quite low.
The crew left the International Space Station fully rejuvenated and in the optimum altitude for the arrival of the Zvezda service module in July.
Astronauten der US-Raumfähre Atlantis haben ihre Arbeiten an der Internationalen Raumstation erfolgreich beendet. Ihre Rückkehr zur Erde müssen sie jedoch verschieben. Die für Montag geplante Landung verzögert sich wegen einer Sturmfront und dem Rauch eines inzwischen gelöschten Buschfeuers in der Nähe des Weltraumbahnhofs Cape Canaveral. Die Atlantis soll jetzt am Mittwoch wieder auf der Erde aufsetzen.
Arbeiten hat sich die Raumfähre Atlantis wieder von der internationalen Raumstation ISS abgekoppelt. Die 7 Astronauten an Bord hatten die Station in eine höhere Umlaufbahn gebracht und Reparaturen ausgeführt. Die Crew soll am Montag zur Erde zurückkehren. Nach Angaben der NASA könnte die ISS in einem halben Jahr wieder bewohnbar sein. Voraussetzung ist, dass Russland sein seit 2 Jahren versprochenes Wohn- und Servicemodul einbaut. Dann sollen auch die ersten wissenschaftlichen Experimente an Bord beginnen.
Erde. Wie die NASA heute mitteilte, wurden die Reparaturarbeiten an der internationalen Raumstation ISS erfolgreich beendet und die Atlantis abgekoppelt. Am Montag soll die Raumfähre wieder landen. 7 Astronauten hatten unter anderem die Batterien für die Energieversorgung der internationalen Raumstation ausgetauscht. Außerdem brachten sie die ISS in eine höhere Umlaufbahn, denn sie war in letzter Zeit um mehr als 2 Kilometer pro Woche abgesackt.
Tomorrow looks a little bit better, but a lot of rain showers now all the way from the Ohio Valley right into western Pennsylvania and is sliding all the way back with the cold front right through southern Georgia, parts of Mississippi, Louisiana, and even into East Texas at this hour. A couple of the heavier showers have moved offshore. The Cape Hatteras area, Myrtle Beach saw a fairly heavy rain shower as well. And a couple of thunderstorms just to the north of Charlotte right through here. Another line developing. And then the rest of the range still down to the south. It's been a very wet day across parts of Ohio. Now the rain finally getting out of the Columbus area here. Still Pickerington, looks like Reynoldsburg still seeing some rain showers on up to Mansfield and also on up into the Cleveland vicinity. The rain's not going to be stopping there for a little while longer. Now by tomorrow morning things get a little bit better. So if you're in the east and you're trying to get a picnic planned for tomorrow, it doesn't look as bad. Virginia, West Virginia, parts of, North Carolina, the Cape there, and also down into South Carolina, you still could have some showers even into tomorrow afternoon. The rest of the country, though, fairly mild, quite a bit of sunshine, and a fairly good day for a picnic or two across the country, all the way from north to south, although still cool across the Northland here. Tonight, 40s and 50s across New England back into the Delmarva. And then for tomorrow afternoon, it stays cool in the northeast, but it sure warms up in the west. Temperatures in the 90s, even a few scattered 100s.
With all major mission objectives completed, Atlantis' crew turned its attention to preparing for a return trip home. Saturday evening, Commander Jim Halsell, pilot Scott Horowitz, and flight engineer Jeff Williams successfully fired Atlantis' steering jets and verified the performance of the various aero surfaces that will be used during Atlantis' return to Earth. This checkout is a routine activity on the day prior to landing to verify that all required systems are operating as expected. As Halsell, Horowitz, and Williams conducted their work from the flight deck, crewmates Mary Ellen Weber, Jim Voss, Susan Helms, and Yuri Usachov continued stowing equipment used over the past 9 days in orbit. Throughout the 5 days of docked operations with the International Space Station, the Spacehab module in Atlantis' payload bay served as the way station for more than 3,000 pounds of material transferred between the two spacecraft. The astronauts will ensure that the equipment in the Spacehab and in Atlantis' crew cabin is properly stowed. Williams and Voss, who conducted a 6.5-hour spacewalk earlier in the mission, packed up and stowed their spacesuits and associated hardware. The crew also gathered for a final review of entry and landing procedures. The astronauts took time from entry preparations to talk with reporters in the United States and Russia. Helms discussed her initial thoughts upon entering the International Space Station.
I guess my impression when I got in there was that it seemed extremely familiar. Of course, Jim and Yuri and I have done a lot of tough training on the FGB in Star City. And to me, it felt a great deal like the trainer that they did have in Star City. And because it was so familiar, it felt more like home, as I'm expecting it to be, than anything else. It was just beautiful. I was very, very impressed.
Weber gave an overview of the refurbishments done to the station.
Well, we did a lot of work on the electrical system, and from all reports, things are up and running well. The station is fully powered. It also has about between 1,000 and 3,000 pounds of new hardware, depending on whether or not you subtract out the old stuff we brought back here. And it has all types of different hardware. It has equipment. It also has supplies, personal hygiene. It has clothes. It has just about anything you could imagine that the first increment's going to need in their first several months of stay up on International Space Station.
Atlantis remains in excellent condition, and the crew is preparing for a scheduled return to Earth with a touchdown at the Kennedy Space Center at 1:20 a.m. Central Daylight Time Monday.
It's 7 a.m. in London on Monday, May the 29th. You're watching CNN This Morning. Hello and welcome. I'm Charlotte Smith in London. Thanks for joining us.
Talk about the shuttle. Everything is a go, apparently, because the situation is under control, so we'll talk about that in a minute. In the meantime, look at in Florida is fine. We believe that the landing is going to be okay. I'm talking about the shuttle, and we are all waiting for your explanations. Charlotte, back to you.
Thanks very much indeed, Guillermo. Still to come here on CNN This Morning, as we wait for the shuttle to come down, we take a look at the revival of Jewish culture in Berlin. Stay with us.
You have that long runway there.
Despite early worries about the weather conditions, you may have guessed by the picture that we came back in on after that break, the space shuttle Atlantis is preparing to touch down at the Kennedy Space Center in the United States in Florida, back from its 10-day mission to repair the fledgling International Space Station. And we're hoping to bring you live pictures. Indeed, there we are. It's extremely dark. This has been the 21st flight of the Atlantis, and it is a night landing, only the 14th time in 98 shuttle missions in total that has happened, and it's no mean feat in some heavy crosswinds, apparently.
The gear is down and locked. And main gear touchdown. Atlantis rolling out on runway 15 at the Kennedy Space Center, and nose gear touchdown.
I wouldn't pretend to be, but that looked pretty good to me, given that it's a 100-ton space shuttle. As we said, it's returning from a mission involving 7 crew members, 1 Russian and 6 US astronauts, to carry out repairs on the embryonic International Space Station. 3 of those astronauts on board, or rather the Russian cosmonaut and 2 US astronauts, are due to return to the International Space Station sometime next year. They'll be spending up to 6 months
runway 15 at the
in
Kennedy Space Center.
But all looks well at Cape Canaveral in Florida. If you can make out those pictures, that looked like an extremely smooth landing. There had been concerns with crosswinds of 14 miles per hour, but that was just about the limit for wind speeds for a safe landing.
To the International Space Station. There are no immediate
But everything has gone well indeed, as we're hearing there, and we'll bring you more on that in the coming hour, on what they did up in space and what they intend to do over the next 6 months. CNN This Morning continues after this break.
Houston, we'd like air data if you do.
Atlantis, take air data.
Take air data.
And that call to take air data allows the air data probes to provide Atlantis' general purpose computers with some additional information on dynamic pressure, airspeed, and altitude. That helps to refine its navigation information. Atlantis now traveling at a speed of 1,900 miles an hour, still 80 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center, traveling at a speed of 1,800 miles per hour now, at an altitude of 16 miles. Time to touchdown now, just 6 minutes and 35 seconds. And this view now is through the pilot point of view camera, as Atlantis is just about 65 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center as it approaches runway 15, traveling at a speed of 1,500 miles an hour now. Its altitude is just about 60 miles and passing through Mach 2, or 2 times the speed of sound. Again, all systems continuing to perform well.
Atlantis, Houston, you are on energy approaching the hack. Your winds, pure crosswind, 7 peak 10 from the right. Nominal, shoot, deploy.
Copy the crosswind, copy nominal, shoot, deploy.
Atlantis is right on track and in position for its landing at the Kennedy Space Center. A time to touchdown now, just 4 minutes and 45 seconds. Atlantis continuing to travel at a speed of 780 miles an hour, just about to go subsonic. Its altitude now just 10 miles. It's away from the landing site at a distance of 34 miles. And this view of Atlantis from the long-range tracking cameras, infrared cameras, as Atlantis approaches the landing site at the Kennedy Space Center. And with touchdown now just about 4 minutes away, Commander Jim Halsell will begin to select the pitch, roll, and yaw, control of the speed brake. And Commander Jim Halsell is now in manual control of Atlantis as it approaches the landing site at the Kennedy Space Center. Now just 3 minutes and 15 seconds away from touchdown. Atlantis now distant from the landing site at about 20 miles, traveling at a speed of 530 miles per hour. Commander Jim Halsell now beginning to initiate a
Atlantis, on at the 180.
Copy, on at the 180.
And Atlantis is now approaching the heading alignment cylinder. Commander Jim Halsell will execute a left overhead turn. Continuing to fly manually, that turn now in progress in this view of Atlantis from the infrared cameras at the Kennedy Space Center. Time to touchdown now, just 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
Atlantis, on at the 90.
Copy, on at the 90.
And that call confirming that Atlantis is now well into turning into its turn to align it with the runway 15 at the Kennedy Space Center. In this view from the pilot point of view camera as Atlantis approaches the landing site at the Kennedy Space Center. Atlantis now traveling at a speed of 415 miles per hour. Its altitude now is only about 2.5 miles, just 9 miles away from the Kennedy Space Center. Time to touchdown now, 1 minute and 35 seconds.
Runway inside, Houston.
Roger.
Commander Jim Halsell advising that he has the runway in sight, the runway lights visible in this view through the pilot point of view camera. Time to touchdown now, just 1 minute and 10 seconds. Just 50 seconds from touchdown now, at an altitude of 3,100 feet. "30 seconds from touchdown, the runway clearly visible as Commander Jim Halsell brings Atlantis in for a landing. And the gear is down and locked. And main gear touchdown. Atlantis rolling out on runway 15 at the Kennedy Space Center, and nose gear touchdown. An on-time landing at the Kennedy Space Center. Atlantis now on runway 15 at the Kennedy Space Center.
Wheel stop, Houston.
Roger, wheel stop, Atlantis. Jim, congratulations to you and the crew on just a super mission to the International Space Station. There are no immediate post-landing deltas, and we'll meet you on page 5-3 of the entry checklist.
And congratulations to Commander Jim Halsell from the flight control team here in Houston, as relayed by spacecraft communicator Rick Sturkow. The crew will now begin the process of configuring their vehicle, safing the vehicle.
Miles around the cabin here. Appreciate your help.
Roger.
Here in the flight control room, Entry Flight Director John Shannon taking a quick poll of his flight control team for any changes or deltas to the post-landing checklist. Everything very smooth. And the crew members on board will now just begin a series of configuring a series of switches, securing the orbital maneuvering system and reaction control system engines, and closing valves so that the vehicle is in a safe configuration. That safing procedure generally takes about 15 minutes or so.
Atlantis, Houston, on page 5-8, perform RAD reconfig.
Going to page 5-8 for RAD reconfig. Convoy Commander CDR Hattie. MCC CDR, we have the right clear. Well, thank you. Glad to be back. Houston, Atlantis, let me know when Max is ready for the doors.
Atlantis, Max is watching you. We're ready for the doors.
Pilot Scott Horowitz now opening the external tank valves that will allow the ground support crew to connect to those external tank valve openings. With Atlantis safely on the runway, the crew members should be able to leave the vehicle about 45 minutes from now or so, after the process of configuring the vehicle or safing the vehicle, and after the arrival of the crew transport vehicle out to the landing site. Some additional details on the landing today. Main gear touchdown for Atlantis on runway 15 at the Kennedy Space Center took place at 1:20:17 a.m. Central Time today, or at a mission elapsed time of 9 days, 20 hours, 9 minutes, and 8 seconds. Nose gear touchdown followed at 1:20 a.m. and 30 seconds, or at 9 days, 20 hours, 9 minutes and 51 seconds. And finally, we'll stop at 1:21 and 19 seconds a.m. Central Time. That wheel stop mission elapsed time is 9 days, 20 hours, 10 minutes, 10 seconds.
Test required today.
Negative, Atlantis. Not required today.
Thank you.
Atlantis, Houston, Panel 06, we'd like GPC 5 to stand by.
GPC 5, come to stand by.
Atlantis, Houston, area clear, go to doff suits.
Go to doff suits, thank you. Houston, Atlantis, standing by APU hydraulic shutdown.
Atlantis, you are go for APU hydraulic shutdown.
Copy, go. The APU hydraulic shutdown is complete.
Copy, Atlantis. Thank you. Atlantis, Houston, you are go for extended power up.
Copy, go for extended power up. Houston, here comes post-landing MPS reconfig.
Roger, Doc. Atlantis, Houston, we're ready for GPC 5 to run.
GPC 5 coming to run. Houston, Atlantis for prop. We're ready to start the valve test.
Copy, Doc. Prop is watching for the RCS ohms valve test.
As we understand, a problem-free touchdown in a rainy and windy Florida this morning. Only the 14th time a U.S. space shuttle has landed in the dark, believe it or not, in a total of 98 missions. There are 7 astronauts on board. 3 of them are planning and scheduled to go back up to the International Space Station next year and spend up to 6 months on board. So they've had 10 days worth of training for that. They've been carrying out repairs and taking supplies, including a sewing kit, a treadmill, clothing and trash bags up to the space station so that they're as comfortable as possible for when they go back. All right, safely landed, and that's the end of this show for now.
Runway 15 at the Kennedy
We go to
Space
Becky
Center.
with World Business this morning after this break. Stay with us.
Im All ist die Raumfähre Atlantis vor einer halben Stunde sicher zur Erde zurückgekehrt. Mit 7 Astronauten an Bord landete sie planmäßig im Weltraumzentrum Cape Canaveral. 6 Tage lang hatte die Crew die internationale Raumstation ISS wieder auf Vordermann gebracht. Diese soll laut NASA in einem halben Jahr bewohnbar sein.
Damit ist der Weg frei für das russische Service-Modul, das seit 2 Jahren erwartet wird. Kommt es wie geplant tatsächlich im Juli an Bord der ISS, könnte bereits im November die erste dauerhafte Besatzung in der Raumstation ihre Arbeit aufnehmen.
Ende der Reparaturarbeiten in der internationalen Raumstation ISS wieder sicher auf der Erde gelandet. Sie setzte pünktlich um 8:20 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Sommerzeit auf dem Weltraumbahnhof Cape Canaveral in Florida auf. Die NASA hatte zunächst befürchtet, dass sich die Landung wegen einer herannahenden Sturmfront verschieben könnte. In der Nacht hatten sich die Wetterbedingungen dann aber gebessert. Die Raumfahrtbehörde NASA war mit der Mission der 7 Astronauten äußerst zufrieden. Die Station sei so gut wie neu, so ein NASA-Sprecher. Die Astronauten hatten 4 Batterien für die Energieversorgung ausgetauscht und die sinkende Station in eine 45 Kilometer höhere Umlaufbahn gebracht.
Atlantis ist nach einem 10-tägigen Aufenthalt im All in der vergangenen Nacht sicher auf dem Kennedy-Weltraumzentrum in Cape Canaveral gelandet. Wegen starker Gegenwinde war das Wiederaufsetzen zunächst gefährdet. Es gelang dann per Handsteuerung. Die 7 Astronautinnen und Astronauten hatten Reparaturarbeiten an der Weltraumstation ISS ausgeführt. Sie tauschten unter anderem defekte Batterien aus und brachten Kommunikationssysteme wieder in Gang.
Space Shuttle Atlantis is home safe. The latest shuttle mission ended with a spectacular nighttime landing at the United States Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The 7-member crew spent the past 10 days in orbit, repairing and resupplying the International Space Station. That project is well behind schedule. CNN space correspondent Miles O'Brien looks at the gap between a dream to live in space and the problems back here on Earth.
The problem isn't a lack of hardware. In fact, NASA's Space Station processing facility is literally overflowing with pieces of the most audacious engineering puzzle ever envisioned. No, the problem is they're still here, years after they should have been here.
Yeah, I mean, I look at all this flight hardware that's sitting here ready to launch, and I say, let's go. We're ready.
Astronaut and now Space Station manager Bob Cabana went to the International Space Station on the first and still the only assembly mission in December of 1998. 9 more U.S. and Russian missions should have happened since then. Instead, there have been just 2, including the one last week.
Oh, it's extremely frustrating. It's hard for the crews to be assigned that long and working on it, trying to get going.
The Russians are promising to get going this summer by launching their primary contribution to the 16-nation partnership, the so-called service module. It will control and guide the station and provide living quarters for the Vanguard crews. It is a cornerstone. Without it, construction of the million-pound station will remain at a standstill.
Everything is on track for launching the service module in July. You know, barring any unforeseen circumstance, but I think this time they really are making every effort to meet the commitment.
In the past, the Russians have been hard-pressed to live up to their commitment to the station. First, it was a lack of funds, and then it was a pair of failures of Proton rockets, the type that will carry the service module to orbit. That's why it's now more than 2 years late. One congressional estimate says the delays have added $5 billion to a price tag that was already $60 billion.
It really is a scandal, and it's a scandal the majority of the American people are totally unaware of.
And meanwhile, the Russians are still using resources to hang on to Space Station Mir, now 14 years old, presently occupied by a privately financed crew.
You know, you got to fish or cut bait, and I think it's time to cut bait with the Russians. They're just not delivering, and they're putting their resources in keeping Mir afloat, and that to me is a very, very clear signal that they have never been truly serious about their involvement in the International Space Station.
But it's not just the delays that are giving NASA managers heartburn. There's some concern the Russians are cutting corners on safety. A recent report by the General Accounting Office to Congress concludes the Russian components do not meet some critical NASA safety requirements. The report concludes the service module is not properly shielded against micrometeoroids. Equipment is unable to operate after a loss of cabin pressure. Windows do not meet NASA specifications, and noise levels are unacceptably high.
See, I'll hold the microphone out in the middle and listen for a few seconds.
In fact, noise is a concern on the Russian piece of the station already in orbit. But the shuttle crew there last week minimized the problem.
It just sounds to me like a little bit of humming motors in the background. Actually, the noise level's a lot less than what I thought it would be.
They were also downplaying concerns about the air quality. The last crew to visit the station became ill. Poor ventilation was blamed. But NASA says problems like this are inevitable, and it's the response that matters.
The
problems have been fixed, and the environment it is extremely user-friendly.
Many people at NASA are starting to believe building a space station with 15 other nations as partners is harder than going to the moon.
In some ways it was, because we had total control. We didn't have to ask, well, what's your opinion on this? How do you want to do it? You know, we just dictated to ourselves how we were going to do it.
But those days are gone. And in this new era of space exploration, NASA's biggest challenges may be the ones it faces right here on the ground. Miles O'Brien, CNN, at the Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
In Cape Canaveral ist die US-Raumfähre am frühen Morgen sicher gelandet. Die Besatzung hatte Ausrüstung in die internationale Raumstation ISS gebracht. Außerdem wurde die Station, die immer mehr an Höhe verlor, in eine sichere Umlaufbahn gebracht. Im Jahr 2005 soll die ISS fertiggestellt sein.
Die Fähre setzte in der Nacht sicher auf dem Weltraumbahnhof Cape Canaveral in Florida auf. Die 7-köpfige Besatzung hatte Reparaturarbeiten an der im Bau befindlichen Weltraumstation ISS durchgeführt.
Pünktlich um 8:20 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Sommerzeit hatte die Atlantis wieder festen Boden unter den Füßen. Der Kommandant James Halsell setzte den stählernen Vogel per Handsteuerung auf die Landebahn. Die NASA hatte zunächst befürchtet, dass sich die Landung wegen einer herannahenden Sturmfront verschieben könnte. Doch über Nacht verbesserten sich die Wetterbedingungen und alles verlief ebenso glatt wie die vorangegangene Mission im All. Die 7 Astronautinnen und Astronauten haben 5 Tage lang die im Bau befindliche Weltraumstation ISS repariert. Die Station, die zuletzt stetig an Höhe verloren hatte, wurde auf eine stabile Umlaufbahn gebracht. Außerdem reparierte die Crew Kommunikationssysteme und tauschte defekte Batterien aus. Die Astronauten schufen damit die Voraussetzungen dafür, dass im Juli das von Russland gebaute zentrale Modul an der Station andocken kann. In diesem Modul befinden sich Wohnquartiere künftiger Besatzung der ISS. Die Lieferung des Moduls hatte sich zuletzt immer wieder verzögert und damit den gesamten Bau der Station in Verzug gebracht. Die Raumfähre Atlantis soll im August zur ISS zurückkehren, um die Station mit weiteren Vorräten und Ausrüstung zu beliefern. In etwa einem halben Jahr soll die Station bewohnbar sein. Dann sollen auch die ersten wissenschaftlichen Experimente an Bord beginnen. Am Bau der umgerechnet rund 130 Milliarden Mark teuren ISS sind neben Deutschland noch weitere 15 Staaten beteiligt.
Ihre Atlantis ist nach 10 Tagen sicher zur Erde zurückgekehrt. Für die NASA war die Mission ein voller Erfolg. Die Besatzung der Atlantis hatte die internationale Raumstation ISS repariert und wieder auf Kurs gebracht. Die ISS hatte in den letzten Wochen ständig an Höhe verloren. In einem halben Jahr soll die Raumstation bewohnbar sein.
Cape Canaveral. Nach 10 Tagen im All ist die US-Raumfähre Atlantis heute zur Erde zurückgekehrt. Wegen heftigen Gegenwindes musste Kommandant Halsell die Atlantis per Handsteuerung auf der Landebahn des Kennedy-Weltraumzentrums in Florida aufsetzen. Die 7-köpfige Besatzung hatte dringende Reparaturarbeiten an der im Bau befindlichen internationalen Weltraumstation ISS ausgeführt. In etwa einem halben Jahr soll die 130 Milliarden Mark teure Station bewohnbar sein.
Nach 10-tägigem Einsatz ist die Besatzung der US-Raumfähre Atlantis sicher zur Erde zurückgekehrt. Die Fähre landete gegen 2:20 Uhr Ortszeit auf der Piste des Raumfahrtzentrums in Cape Canaveral. Die 7-köpfige Besatzung hatte Reparaturarbeiten an der im Bau befindlichen internationalen Weltraumstation ISS ausgeführt und Material an Bord gebracht.
Here we are, the early morning hours. Prior to launch, the vehicle is being prepared. Meanwhile, the crew is inside the suit room, getting into and testing out their suits. Yours truly, followed by the pilot, Scott Horowitz, Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Air Force. Dr. Mary Ellen Weber, Mission Specialist number 1. Our MS-2, our flight engineer and lead spacewalker, Army Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Williams. Army Colonel retired Jim Voss, and Air Force Colonel Susan Helms. Finally, but certainly not least, Yuri Yusuchev, Russian cosmonaut. This is his 3rd flight. He has over 1 year in space. After being suited up and having the suits tested out, we walked out to the Astrovan, and this is a special moment for the crew. It's a chance to wave goodbye to many of the people who are a big part of what's about to happen. It's certainly an emotional high point for the crew. Our job is to go out to the vehicle and to strap in. We actually strap in 2 people at a time, one person in the flight deck, as you see here. Simultaneously, somebody in the mid-deck is being strapped in. And you can see it's a tight fit. You have to be careful not to hit the switches over your head, but at the same time slide into your seat. This was the first flight of the glass cockpit, the new and improved cockpit that all shuttles will be upgraded to. It provided a greater level of situation awareness for all the crew members in all phases of flight.
Now comes the moment of truth. The main engine's light 6 seconds prior to liftoff. The entire vehicle shudders against the bolts holding us to the pad, and then boom, the solid rocket boosters light. 7.5 million pounds of thrust. We leap off the pad, and before we know it, we're rolling upside down and heading up to the northeast to go join the space station. It's quite a ride. While we're on the solid rocket boosters, the vehicle shakes quite a bit. It's almost hard to read your displays. In 44 seconds, we're going supersonic straight up, which is quite a thrill. And then in 2 minutes, 5 seconds, we've used up all the fuel in the solid rocket boosters. There's a loud explosion as they depart the vehicle and are carried off with their small engines on the side. You can see here, it's a glorious sight right at sunrise. And then the main engines sucking fuel out of that orange tank there at about a rate that would empty an Olympic swimming pool in 20 seconds, propels us to orbit. And in 8 minutes and 30 seconds, we're going just slightly less than 18,000 miles an hour as we get inserted into orbit. All right, after we get to orbit, the main engine shut down. We call that MECO. And then there's another loud explosion. And the external tank, this amazing footage here shows the external tank leaving us. And we will fly up and away from the tank, and you'll get a great shot here of the tank going below us before it re-enters. And look at the burn marks on the bottom of the tank and the scorch marks from the engines.
Well, the first thing we had to do during this flight, after we got on orbit, is rendezvous with the space station. This sequence of shots shows us as we come up from behind and below and then fly in front of and finally above the International Space Station, and we make our final approach from above coming down. This is a view inside the cockpit. Everybody had an important duty during the final approach. Susan, for example, was running the rendezvous computer. Yuri was firing the handheld laser to make sure that our range and range rate were proper. My job, meantime, was to line up the docking target that you see here to make sure we had no angular misalignments. The final approach shown here, the last few feet, that's the International Space Station in the top half of the screen. That's us in the shuttle in the lower half of the screen. Our approach speed is about 1 inch per second. My task is to fly inside the 3-inch circle. And it all worked exactly as we had been trained. Right here, I push a button which fires rockets, which thrust us up into the station to make sure we make good contact and good capture. Even though this was the first of many major tasks, you can see there's a moment of relief, wow, we got the first one under our belts. Now it's time to go to work inside the space station.
As a rookie on the flight, there were many highlights, of course, but perhaps the day after the rendezvous was the biggest highlight. That was the spacewalk. Jim and I had a pre-breathe on 100% oxygen in preparation for the low pressure in the suit. And here I am having a last-minute snack before getting suited up in the spacesuit. And here's Jim with me in the back getting the suits on before we enter the airlock and depress to go outside. The spacewalk was a crew-intensive activity. Scott ran the checklist from the inside, and Mary Ellen ran the robotic arm, which moved Jim around during most of the spacewalk. Going outside and having the opportunity to view the Earth outside it was very spectacular. It was something that I really enjoyed and certainly was the highlight of the mission. And I did take an opportunity to look around, even though we were working pretty hard. We did several tasks on the spacewalk. One of the biggest tasks was to take some hardware for a Russian crane, which will be used later in the station assembly. The previous mission had taken the operator post for that crane up and left it on the space station, and we took the remaining components. Here you see the boom, which is a telescoping boom, which will extend and be used to aid spacewalkers in the future. We're taking it out of the payload bay and moving it up on the space station. Again, Mary Ellen was very intent during the whole EVA moving Jim around on the arm from the aft cockpit.
This is the best form of public transportation in the world. Mary Ellen did a wonderful job moving me around. She never shook me off of the arm. I was really happy with that. This is the Strela boom that I was carrying up there to meet Jeff so that he could actually attach it to the operator post. And it's quite heavy and massive. I had to turn it around to have it in the right orientation to plug it in, and it was really quite easy to move around in space, even a massive object like this. Then when Mary Ellen moved me up to the right position, then Jeff prepared the operator post. I stuck it over nearby there, and he guided it into position and assembled the two pieces together. It really worked very well. The Russians built a good piece of hardware here, and it assembled together very nicely. You can see out on the end there's sort of a ring around the boom. That's used for transportation along the boom. You attach a tether to that, and then you can move along the entire length of it without changing your tether. Once it's assembled, these bolts go together. We had to attach another piece to it, and then the entire thing, the boom with the base as well, were removed. Jeff grabbed the very bottom piece of it and took it up to the top of the station, and then we moved this entire piece up there and put it back into another location so that it's ready for construction later on. Here you see it actually coming apart and getting ready to move it up higher up on the station. This is an overview, kind of what it's like for us when we're moving up there with the station in the background. It's really quite a view. After 6 hours and about 45 minutes, we did have to go back inside, and this is us doing our final preparations, and then Scott opening the hatch to let us back in after a very successful extravehicular activity. We were tired by that time and ready to see them and get something to eat and rest a little bit.
Well, the fourth day of the mission was dedicated to doing repairs and upgrades on the external part of the space station, but the fifth day of the mission was really dedicated to the start of what I like to think of as the rescue aspect of the space station, and that was to do the internal repairs and the internal upgrades. This scenery that you see here is someone with a camcorder traveling through the shuttle, going from one end to the other of what's in the payload bay, but then they make this immediate turn and head up into the space station. And I like this view because it shows you basically how massive the structure really is. And this is really less than half of the size it will be when Jim, Yuri, and I return for increment number 2. Jeff and Jim also were busy at work inside what we call the node. This is a picture of the node. It's quite large and squatty, and it's a marked difference than how you will soon see the Russian segment, which we call the functional cargo block, or the FGB. Along the way, you see ductwork. There was a concern prior to our flight about air quality. There were good reasons to be concerned. We did a lot of extra training to make sure we knew how to assemble this ductwork so that we would not have any problems with air quality. And in fact, we took so many measurements of the air that we really did prove that we've solved the problem. Good scene here of Yuri and myself working on the battery. That was our priority, was to get inside the Russian segment, open up the panels, and start work immediately on the parts of the Russian segment that had the most trouble, and those were the storage batteries. Over the period of several days, Yuri and Jim and myself changed out components on 4 of the 6 batteries that are used to provide electrical power to the Russian segment. And we were very busy. We had toolkits that we basically floated around with, and we borrowed tools from each other. It was very much like working in your garage, and the work itself wasn't very complicated, but it became complicated when you looked at the aspect of losing your tools in microgravity, and so we spent a lot of time making sure we didn't do that. We also had some repairs taking place inside the node, and this was just one scene of a very, very busy mission. I think overall we were told we had 42 separate repairs that we accomplished in just a few short days. Those of you with sharp eyes may have noticed there aren't a lot of switches inside the space station, and the reason is we've changed to a new ops concept for how we operate space hardware, space station hardware. Jeff here is showing you a computer display, and it is through this display that we will do all the functions and controls.
Now you're looking in another part of the shuttle. This is the Space Hab module. It's essentially a room addition that we had out in the payload bay. Here we had over 3,000 pounds of equipment that we had to transfer over to the station. There you see the 4 batteries that were replaced in the station earlier. Now I'm carrying a large piece of exercise equipment through the tunnels back to the station. This is just one of the pieces of hardware that we did transfer. it is important once you transfer it over to strap it down good and tight in preparation for the next station module that will be docking with the station, and you can see Jeff and I are about to do that. As I said, it was about 3,000 pounds of equipment that we transferred, exercise equipment, food supplies, personal clothes, as well as environmental equipment. All those bags that you see strapped to the walls of the Russian segment, those are some of the bags that we brought over.
You get some good jobs in space, like an EVA, and you get some bad jobs, like having to do the laundry. Somebody had to pack it up for return home, and I got that job. You can see all the clutter in the background. It really gets quite crowded after we have all of our equipment out from its stowage. Here Susan and Jeff are working with laptop computers. We get information from the ground, all of our flight plans and that type of information, as well as the capability to do email with our families. Mary Ellen's exercising. You can see her sound system floating there nearby her. It's completely unattached, and she's riding around the world.
Of course, you can't go too long without food, and food was a daily part of the activities up here. Here's Scott reaching into one of the food lockers to put the meal together for the crew. We had somebody prepare every meal, and then we gathered together, at least for the dinner meal, and shared that on the middeck and shared stories, what happened to each other during the day, and planned the next mission. And it also gave us an opportunity to celebrate even the small victories. One of the fascinating things in space was physics, and we all turned into little kids from time to time. And here you see a water bubble with two air bubbles that we blew inside it, and Yuri is manipulating it around with a piece of dental floss.
Well, we've had a great mission so far. We've done all the work we came to do on the space station, and all the repairs are made. And now it's time to leave the International Space Station. And what you see here is sort of the reverse sequence of what Jim showed you earlier with the rendezvous. That's the target moving away on the centerline camera as we undock and move away from the station. We're above the station. Here's an amazing view. You're looking back on the top of your screen at the shuttle as seen from the station via a downlink view from station. We flew up and away from the station, then did a half lap around it, and then departed with a retrograde burn, and away we flew. And you get some amazing footage here of the world. And next day we cleaned up the shuttle, and then it was time to get back in our suits. And you see Jim helping us on the flight deck get into our launch and entry suits. I call them the pumpkin suits. And we did a night entry, which is spectacular. You hit the atmosphere at 25 times the speed of sound, and it literally rips the air apart. And that, what looks like lightning, is actually the plasma exploding out the windows.
After 30 minutes of entry, we approached the Kennedy Space Center. That was an infrared view of what it looked like from the ground, and here we are on final approach. Our speed here is slowing down from 300 knots on the outer glide slope. We're on the inner glide slope. At an altitude of 50 feet, I slowly pull the nose up and try to achieve a soft touchdown. Our actual touchdown parameters right there, we're at 199 knots and 3,200 feet down the runway. As soon as I touch down, Scott helps slow us down by deploying the drag chute while I lower the nose to the runway, and then it just takes very gentle rudder pressure to maintain the center line as we roll to a stop, and Scott jettisons the drag chute. The last shot here is of a very happy crew at the end of a very exciting and very fruitful mission, and we want to thank each and every one of you for being part of that thumbs up.